I think you interviewed Julie's husband.
Oh, Russell?
Russell, yeah,
Yep.
they left.
Okay, gotcha.
So I really don't know.
New every day. You're like, that really happened, or you can't believe something's not being acknowledged. It's just the same circle of really not knowing what's going on and asking for answers, and we just get the same.
Right. And it seems like it's kind of been like that all the way through at this point,
Yeah.
as things are kind of all over the place, the messaging constantly changing, unfortunately needing to bump from one hotel to another, or staying with family one week and a hotel the next.
Yeah.
That was an issue the last time we were here. We were staying in this hotel as well, and folks on the day that we were checking out were like, yep, we were supposed to keep staying here. Unfortunately, it's sold out, so we tried to get another hotel close by, but they're all sold out unless, I go too far away, then it's too far from work,
Yep.
and so people are making this balancing act of, I guess I'm going to go stay in my home for another night or two, even though they're uncomfortable going to do that.
Yeah.
But when you have to go to work the next day, it makes it a hard decision to try to make.
Or if you have kids going to school too, or you don't have a consistent schedule.
Right.
Or you have to book for a month in advance, and you really have to beg the center that refunds us and gives us our inconvenience to really drag it out. Like, hey, we need more money for this, and then we have to beg, then they question us, then we sound like a bad guy because we're asking, but we don't feel safe at home, and there's still nothing being done about that.
Right. I guess why don't we start there? You mentioned needing to still, folks at this point, 3 months in, if you're trying to get any assistance, you're still needing to go to the railroad, to the Norfolk Southern Assistance Center, to essentially beg for the money for hotels, for whatever other things have come up as a result of this derailment. I guess either personally, have you had recent experiences with them? How have they been? I know I've heard a lot of stories from other folks as well, but...
I went and I didn't spend enough money, so I couldn't get more money to put towards that. So if I wanted to book a hotel in a month and just have a month for it, well, I didn't spend $1,000 of that money, but I booked further.
Right.
And they're like, no, we can't do that, and kind of laugh at you. So it's funny that you want to have a security and a place to go. You don't feel safe, but we're going to laugh at you.
And it also seems like it's very, one person will get one thing, one person will get another. Some folks I've talked to, it sounds like, have been placed in a situation where they've got, housing for the next 6 weeks or a month or something like that, or longer in some cases, and then other people are kind of, fighting tooth and nail to, get another 2 weeks. Has there been any more clarity as far as, an actual clear system of, this is how it works? Or is it
No.
still just, get this, you get that?
It's really vague, and you don't know what to ask for. And you hear other people are saying, well, I'm getting this, I'm getting that. And honestly, I'm glad they're getting that. I'm glad they're getting more. But it does cause a divide, and some people are upset, how are you getting that much money? How are you doing that? Well, some people have 8 kids in a
Right.
house. So they're getting a little bit more. They have more money that they need for food, and, we're not getting other things. It's just food and lodging and maybe things that they approve.
Right.
But that's a stretch.
Right, and I mean, it's also affecting, different families in different ways, too. Different people are going to have those different issues as far as you mentioned schooling. I mean, your child's doing online school right now,
Yep, right now, and
on
it's
the other
at
side.
6 o'clock, so...
At 6 o'clock at night, and it's
good for him that he can get that. I'm happy about that, but it's a little bit, it's harder because he's younger, so it's later and it's hard for him to focus.
And I'd also say that, living in a hotel as a kid for weeks on end is tricky, especially, some of the families that I've done interviews with and gotten to know over the past couple months of reporting here have they've got 3 kids, 4 kids, 5 kids, pets.
Yeah, and I have 2 dogs, so that makes it harder when someone else has a dog and I go to take my dog out. He's over-friendly, so then you kind of have to watch and really make your schedule around
Right.
everyone else's, too.
Right. And let alone, you're living in a much smaller space with
yeah.
all of your pets, your family, which, I'm sure you love your family and your pets, but it's nice to close the door every once in a while.
It is, and you don't realize how much you miss it until you were confined in one room, and there's your bed, there's a desk, there's a TV, a fridge, and you're like, wow, it would be nice just to sit in a room and just collect yourself, by yourself for a couple minutes. You
Right.
don't have that.
Yeah. And just to give folks a little bit of an update as to where the whole cleanup process is right now. As it stands right now, one side of the tracks, for those of you who don't remember, when the initial controlled burn happened, there was Norfolk Southern buried a lot of the contaminants underneath the tracks to essentially just get the railroad back open again as quickly as possible. It's pretty clear at this point that that was the main prerogative at that point, was let's just get the railroad moving again. Do we need to set it all on fire to do so? Sure, that's what it looks like to me, at least. Not an expert, although we're working on a lot of stuff surrounding the controlled burn. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the last month or so, they've been actually removing the tracks on one side, removing the contaminated soil from underneath the tracks, and then rebuilding those tracks to then essentially flip and do the same on the other side. So we're now essentially at that kind of halfway point.
Now they're going slower. That was something mentioned at the town hall that we said, well, you have trains and it's just throwing it back in the air and it keeps going. And by you guys doing that and letting the tracks run and having all of that ripped up, it's really throwing it around.
Right.
And we're about 9 miles away. We can smell it at night here. So
Right.
I think they're doing it during the day. That's just my theory. But at night, my son was running outside and his eyes burned. And then I went to try to wipe his eyes and his eyes still burned.
Yeah.
So that's just odd to me, but they said they're doing them in smaller sections.
Right, because from that town hall, which there was a lot of revelations in that town hall. For those of you watching, I'm sure some of you have seen it. If not, I would urge you to check out. A lot of that was posted on our Substack as well. That's another place that you can go to find out more information of what we've got going on. StatusCoup.substack.com for that. But in that meeting that went on that town hall, Mark Durno, the representative from the EPA, had a couple big, what I thought were major news items that nobody else really thought were major news items. Yeah.
Some of it.
Right. And the one that you're talking about here, so when they were removing the tracks on one side, they essentially dug up like almost a third of a mile, half a mile scar through the center of East Palestine where these tracks run, which is the area where the contaminated soil was. And they needed to essentially keep digging until the soil was testing as clean or close to clean. I'm not sure where their actual threshold was for that. But to Ashley's point, the whole thing was essentially open for a lot of this. They were covering piles of dirt here and there and whatnot.
And then they made a mountain of it. And it just sat too, so you see the tarps flying off of the piles of dirt, and it's all contaminated whenever it gets real hot. And our temperatures everywhere. It gets rainy, it gets cold, it snows, then it warms up again, so it's up and down. So as soon as that starts to dry, and all that dusty stuff on the top, the wind blows, and these tarps aren't working, it just goes right back up into the air.
Right.
So it really doesn't do much.
No. So hopefully, and that is what the EPA representative Mark Durno said at that meeting was moving forward, they were going to make a recommendation to do it in smaller sections at a time rather than having this whole essentially half a mile swath of downtown East Palestine exposed to a lot of this contaminated soil that is still under the ground, under half of the railroad, on the I believe they're doing the north side now. Under the north side of the tracks, where there is still contaminated soil there to this day. Another big point that I feel like nobody really talked that much about during that was the question was asked of, wouldn't it have been faster to do both sides of the tracks at the same time and then fill it all back in? And the response from the representative of the US EPA was, well, we think we would have gotten sued if we did it that way. And I'm not going to lie. The EPA getting sued was a decision-making factor, and that was the first thing that he said when asked about it. Really shocked me.
And that's amazing, because if I would go in and really tamper with someone's outside of their house, inside of their house, pour just one chemical. I always say gas. If I'd pour gas all over everything, they would close that down. It's contaminated. You know what I did. You know it's there. They wouldn't even test it. They would close down your house, basically make a line around it, and someone else other than me would clean it up. And that's a huge thing. Okay, I would be sued for doing that. But they're worried about being sued for cleaning and making the situation better.
Right.
It's mind-blowing.
No, it's wild. There's a lot of backward stuff going on with all of this, as you know, more than most people. It's shocking. I guess let's talk a little bit about kind of health symptoms at this point. So we actually are seeing folks still reporting all sorts of health symptoms going on. I noticed in town today a change from the last time I was here is that a lot of the aeration devices that were aerating the polluted creeks through town, many of which of the creeks, it was raining today, so we didn't go up close to see it, but with interviews that we did earlier today that will be posted on Status Coup in the next couple of days. These creeks seem to still be heavily polluted, especially sulfur run at the least. The aeration devices that were essentially taking water from upstream that was, dirtier water upstream, contaminated water upstream, spraying it into the air with the idea being that the water would then just settle back down and the chemicals would dissipate into the air. Which, especially when you saw where some of this was happening in neighborhoods in down, like in East Palestine village. It smelled worse. It smelled worse, and I experienced it firsthand at that point, like getting a big whiff of it on accident, and just, after doing interviews with Chrissy Ferguson the last time I was here, near her home in East Palestine, I had a pounding headache for 3 hours. My neck was tight. I had a sore throat. All these things. At this point, what are the symptoms that folks are reporting? Are you hearing any new things? Are you experiencing anything?
Not so much. Anytime I drive by, we can tell when we're real close. As soon as you see that sign that says, "Welcome to East Palestine," you start to smell it. Doesn't matter if your windows are up or anything. You could drive by and you're there. You smell it, and you start to get like a thick kind of feeling. Like it feels like your chest, your throat, everything kind of hurts, and your eyes start to feel funny, like itchy. But it goes away as soon as you get down the road a little bit further. We have a list of 30 different symptoms so far. There's probably more at this point. The newest one, people are coughing up blood. So we have blood coming from every orifice in our faces except for our eyes at this point, which is astounding that they're still not acknowledging it or saying anything. And these are people living in homes.
And what's wild too is this is a couple weeks old at this point, but still relevant because it was 2 months after the initial controlled burn. But even members of the CDC who they weren't going and doing tests or anything like at ground zero, like walking around at the derailment site. They were essentially going door to door to houses in East Palestine. Checking. Some of our people got sick here. We had to send them out. CNN did a story on it, so credit to them for actually, highlighting some of this. It's not, it's tough because I've said this before, but it's hard to show some of this stuff. Some of the symptoms we have been able to show, but
those are the
hard.
severe ones, and some of those, when you get them all at the same time, that's extremely hard to show or even explain to a T how you feel because you've never felt anything like that.
Right.
I mean, if you're winded, sometimes that's what it feels like. So you're just walking in town, you feel winded,
Yeah,
and you can't breathe.
And it's again, I've experienced some of these symptoms. I'm not there all the time. I never have had to sleep there. Fortunately, we're staying kind of outside of town whenever we've been here. Fortunate to also, especially in the last trip, you had the correct respirator and all of this sort of stuff for when we're near the creeks and that sort of thing. But I've also noticed a lot of these things, and again, especially the things that are harder to show with a camera, right? On the first trip, we did an interview with Jenna Catone and several of her neighbors. They live right along the railroad tracks on Clark Street, downtown East Palestine. And as we were doing the interviews, trains just rolling by the whole time, kicking up all sorts of dust and dirt. And I was wrapping up the end of that live stream, and I was just gassed, out of breath. And I'm not normally like, guys, you can't show this with a video camera, unfortunately. But it is happening. Dozens and dozens of residents that I've spoken with, it's happening. And now you've got places like the CDC admitting that it's happening.
And anyone that I've heard from that's went into town, every single person has said that they've been sick, except for Governor DeWine. He was never sick, apparently, so he must be a wizard. There's
that big gulp of water didn't
well, there's him and a couple other people that are higher up. But I mean, even some Congress people said that they felt sick. That we need help, and it still astounds me that that's not being done too, with it being that serious.
You mentioned Governor DeWine. I guess it's giving me the inkling that he is essentially feeling like once the soil cleanup here is done, that we're all good and done. Clearly, there's going to be a long process of making things right for people. People have been very much exposed to all sorts of different chemicals, and we'll get into I want to talk a little bit about some of the testing that people have done in regards to vinyl chloride testing. But are you getting other feelings about where the governor is at and where the state government is at on this, or does it kind of seem like they're talking like, oh, soil cleanup, when that's all good, we're kind of good to go?
It's kind of like I'm just way too important for this now. I was there, I did my thing. You guys should be happy I was there and took care of what I did. I didn't save you. I know I'm getting emails, I'm getting calls, and everyone's sending emails. And I know that they're even returning calls, but it's still, well, we can't do anything. Or this person, and it's so backwards what we're getting. Well, why can't you just sign that relief? And now it's been extended. So why can't you just sign that? And we're all having medical symptoms, so we should be under some kind of medical relief for it to be evacuated. Right.
Well, and there was no the fact that the state of emergency was just never, like, if that wasn't an emergency, I don't know what is.
And if it was extended, that means that maybe he should look into it again.
Right. And again,
and not go blind.
I know, agreed. It's egregious, and I think the way that you said it, saying that he feels like he's like, yep, I was here. I did my duty.
Give me my gold star. Let me get my sticker and put it on me.
I can't even think, like, what did they actually provide when I go back and look at it, right? On that first trip, I got to speak with him briefly.
That's about the most information we've got, too. That's
it. And it was lies. That's what that's what it was. He basically, I made the point. I was like, hey, I just talked to. He was on East Clark Clark Street, and I was like, hey, I spoke with the people who live in this house, this house, this house, and this house right here last night. They're experiencing all of these symptoms, some of which we just talked about, from sore throats, bloody noses like crazy, especially amongst the kids who are living in that area. People who literally were hospitalized and needed nebulizer treatments, who've never had breathing complications before, rashes. The list went on. What should they do? What are you doing for them? And he pointed them to the clinic. That now the clinic is in a little bit. It's different at this point. But for the first month, maybe more, that clinic didn't provide any actual treatment of any kind, didn't provide prescriptions of any kind, it didn't provide any testing of any kind. You couldn't get a urine test, you couldn't get a blood test. All they were essentially providing were somebody to talk to, which is helpful. You need somebody to talk to tell you the right place to go, and referrals to your doctor. I mean, hopefully you've got good health insurance, because they weren't going to actually help you with anything medically there, which is, again, like, it was clearly causing medical problems in the town. And then to make matters worse, some folks that we were talking with would go to that clinic, and they were like, oh, I've got these rashes, I've got all these other things, and they were like,
stress.
Yeah, you're stressed
out.
Your
whole family is having stress right now, and you both...
And all of your neighbors.
And they're all... everyone just has the same stress rash. Just breathe. You're all very stressed. It's in your head.
Right. And it's like, obviously people were stressed, yes, but... I mean, to the amount of additional symptoms, in addition to the rashes, the chloracne that we've seen in some cases, all of these other things, it's outrageous. And at this point, to use what you said, to feel like, oh, I've been there, I'm all good, like we've done enough in June or whatever, when all the soil is all cleaned up, like that East Palestine problem. That's all good now. But
see, like, they have a clinic, and from what I heard in the beginning, I never went to the clinic because I'm just not going there, and I'm going to keep my distance. They weren't even taking vitals.
Yeah.
That's wild to me. If you can't even do blood pressure at a clinic that needs to monitor you, that is insane. Because if they did, they would see a lot of people started to get elevated blood pressure. I had it. My mom had it. My stepdad had it. I definitely know my boyfriend had it, but he didn't go. Just more and more people, and I posted about it, and there were so many other people that said, yeah, same thing, high blood pressure.
And I'll be clear, too, the clinic that is there now does provide more actual medical services, but for weeks we're talking,
at the
there
beginning
were none.
Of that,
but the beginning is the most important part, right? The first several weeks after this, you have, again, a massive explosion, essentially, of chemicals. The federal resources, including the EPA, were here. The CDC, they probably all could have been here much faster if a state of emergency had been declared by the governor earlier on, which that was a point where he lied to me. I was like, oh, he never returned Biden's phone call or something. Biden's not doing nearly enough about this either, but that's a whole other story. It's a joke. It's nothing. And unfortunately, it's leading to the situation where we're in now, which is folks are still getting sick in some cases, maybe to a slightly lesser extent. It kind of depends, though, because some people we're talking with are still getting sick.
Some people get immune, though, and then whenever you can't smell it, you're getting used to it, because some people will be in their houses for a week and work in town, and then they leave and they come back and it's distinct. Okay, now I smell it again, but then it goes away, so then you don't smell it as bad.
Yeah, but the point, I lost my train of thought for a second, but the major point here is these experts were brought in, the EPA, the state of Ohio opening this clinic and whatnot. Like, these are the people that are supposed to have a plan for when things go wrong. And instead of doing the right thing, which would be testing for everything, you know what I mean? Like, why don't, we open this clinic, we're going to make it free. Why not do urine tests for every single person who walks in the door and asks them to come back?
Been done
why
in the
not
beginning.
do blood tests? Because right now, we're in the issue, and this is a good transition into this, is people in town have started going to get these vinyl chloride urine tests.
And there's only one place that'll do it now, because everyone else has been told not to do that.
Right, and I think I have the guidance right here. So the CDC is actually saying that they don't want to do the vinyl chloride tests. This was from a document that we posted from the meeting with Sherrod Brown, and in the document this was a document that was essentially Sherrod Brown's staff preparing the senator for a meeting with East Palestine residents. And you were there, yes. And in it, they mentioned the reason that CDC is suggesting residents not get testing for vinyl chloride, even though this was set off in their town, essentially, was a couple things. They mentioned lack of accuracy, long turnaround times, difficulty with interpretation, lack of information about baseline levels, and the inability to rule out exposure or guide clinical management. Now, there's a couple major points in here that I have issue with. Let's go through each of them, I guess. Lack of accuracy. The EPA admitted in the last town hall that the air testing devices that they're using for residential air tests...
And I know a lot about that one.
Yes. And so talk about a lack of accuracy. That's a lack of accuracy, the devices that they're using. Not a concern for them there, but it's a concern for them here. The next one, long turnaround times. I'm sorry, but this looks like a major disaster to me. Why don't we put the resources of the federal government, the state government...
And consistently monitor this, because if we don't have that information now, who's to say in 2 years, and we're still in this situation, another town has the same exact thing that happens. Now at least we can help someone by having a baseline for, here's when we tested them this month. This month we tested them, and now we can see from our research and studies that it does progress. If you're exposed to it, gets stirred up in your house, maybe it's not what we said in our documents that are online.
Right. Yeah. It's ridiculous, and it gets worse too, because each one of these points, like, I can point to a clear example of other agencies doing the exact same thing. So difficulty with interpretation. Have the water sample results been easy to interpret? Have the air sample results been easy to interpret?
Can't be used because it was done incorrectly.
Right.
Out of all that, maybe 5 of them are done wrong. Why aren't they jumping on that and redoing them? If that's the case, then they can redo it.
Right. And this isn't just me or Ashley saying these sorts of things. I don't have it right in front of me here, but Dr. Welton, who's been, he works with Purdue University. He's a professor there. He has been doing independent testing in and around East Palestine. He wrote an open letter to the head of the EPA, Michael Reagan, in the last week and a half or 2 weeks ago, specifically calling out the absolute failures, especially in the area of the difficulty of interpretation and the lack of clear information being provided to residents. The EPA is supposed to help present this information to all of you in a clear way.
But they're not going to acknowledge it. It's blatantly there. He has debunked it. He has said his facts, but they're not going to acknowledge it.
Yeah, no, it's and the last bullet here too, a lack of information about baseline levels in the general population. Well, if in the very early stages of this, when you open to this clinic, which again, opening a clinic is the right idea, but you actually need to do things that a clinic would do when you open it, i.e. the testing. If you open to that clinic and you started testing for people for, there's a whole bunch of other chemicals that probably should have been tested for too, but vinyl chloride was the very, very clear one at that point in time. Start collecting urine samples from residents and ask them to come back once a week. I've talked to a couple experts on this, and they agree that, yes, these vinyl chloride tests that are being done, of which we've talked to several people already who have tested positive for vinyl chloride, the metabolite created by vinyl chloride in their urine. But he says that if you had a weekly, essentially, check-in with all of these people, and you had multiple points in time, and you could track amongst a larger amount of the population, even if it was 100 people did it once a week, you would have a plethora of information about this and would actually be able to learn something about it. Instead, the CDC is telling people, oh, you don't need to do it. The clinic that's opened by the state, oh, we don't do that sort of testing. And then when folks try to go do it, they have to jump through a million hoops to be able to get anywhere.
But they're never going to give us a baseline, though, because they don't want that to be found. Because, I mean, this is actually really dangerous. What's being found in blood, what's being found in air, what's being found in water, all of this is extremely dangerous. And if they start documenting anything right, oh gosh, what did we do? Now we have to acknowledge it. Now we have to listen to you guys. Well, it's easier just to clean up and leave.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been speaking with a source, I can't reveal who it is, but he's a former EPA official, worked in the EPA for decades, highly esteemed. He does not work with the EPA anymore, but he said to me, essentially, in some of these cases, these agencies will roll in, and if they don't test for it, it didn't happen. These people don't have it. If they didn't test for it, oh, you magically don't. You haven't been exposed to any of this. If you do the test, then you could open Pandora's box, and you don't know what you're going to find. Obviously, that's outrageous. That's not how these agencies should be operating. I can't say for sure that that's the case. Maybe, I mean, this would also be bad. Maybe they're incompetent. That wouldn't surprise me either, but especially at this point,
I mean, not, because these are the people we're supposed to trust in. So that's even worse.
Yeah. So it leads you into this unfortunate reality of, are these agencies that we all thought were on the up and up either doing their job really poorly on accident, or is it that they are, trying to keep things quiet and cover them up? And either of those scenarios is bad. It's not great.
No.
Another thing I'll point out with these vinyl chloride urine tests, and we're going to have interviews with folks, some that we did today, with a resident from East Palestine who, unfortunately, she had the highest vinyl chloride test result that I had seen so far. We'll be posting that in the next couple of days, as well as someone who actually just did their test today. So we'll be getting results in the next couple of weeks for theirs, as well as a couple others that we'll be interviewing soon here. If you want to see any of those interviews, for those of you watching, first off, press the like button to help get this out to more folks. It really helps with the algorithm. Number two, if you can subscribe down below, press the subscribe button. It's an easy way to help. And honestly, this is our third trip back to East Palestine at this point. This will be my third week in town. We are going to continue to keep pushing this story. The only way that we're able to get me out here 3 times, to get Colin out here, to get, the first time John Farina came out with me, and continue to follow up with folks like Ashley on the story, is by folks becoming members. If you're able to do it, literally as low as $5 a month, statuscoup.com/join is the place to do it. Literally $5 a month. That's like a cup of coffee or a beer somewhere at the bar. If you're able to help do that, please do. But a major point with this...
Well, you forgot one thing. You can do alerts, too, because you guys don't flood it. That's what I do. I always wait to see...
The, notifications?
I get the alerts.
There you go. So press the bell for notifications. There you go. Thank you. A point I want to make about these vinyl chloride urine tests. So it's essentially a test for a metabolite created by vinyl chloride. It's essentially like what your body makes when it's exposed to this chemical. The metabolite in question here is it's a long name. It's thiodiglycolic acid. Might be pronouncing it wrong, but that's thiodiglycolic acid is my best guess at it. It is basically the main way that this would be created is exposure to vinyl chloride. The thing with it, though, is that ordinarily, if you have this metabolite in you, it would mean that you were exposed to vinyl chloride just in like the last couple days. It doesn't stick around in your urine, in your body, like the metabolite, for very long. And somebody that I've been speaking with, an expert on the topic, is very concerned that folks are having these elevated levels months down the line. To this person, it indicated that this is very likely exposure that is still happening, meaning it could very likely be coming from what we were talking about earlier, where you've got a half-a-mile scar through downtown East Palestine opened up with all the contaminated soil. It could be from the creeks.
We have a lot of water underneath homes, too. And then we have sitting water underneath the railroad. So that could also be something coming up.
Yeah, I mean, it's each rock you turn, essentially, you start to find more and more issues going wrong. I will say that right now, Jordan and I are working on potentially a very big story surrounding all of this. We have been reaching out to the EPA for comment. We've been reaching out to the CDC for comment. The EPA, one of the questions that we've been asking, which is kind of the big one, and unfortunately I cannot reveal what the specifics are to it right now, but we should be putting this out in the next week or two. They've been unable to answer the question for almost 2 weeks at this point. They are answering our emails. They are seeing the question. They answered one of our emails today saying they're working on it as fast as they can.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I don't think 2 weeks to answer a pretty basic question is very fast.
I can find out some basic stuff, and if I have the information in front of me like they do, you'd be able to find out that day.
So, again, there is a lot that we are on the verge of uncovering on this. That's why it is so important to continue coming back and continue to establish relationships and meet residents like yourself, like so many of the others that we've been talking to each time we come. And, you know, this is... It's not going away anytime soon, and unfortunately, there is still more, from what it seems, being swept under the rug and covered up here. So again, if you're able to kind of support this kind of reporting that we're doing here, we are going to be publishing a lot of this soon. We'll definitely have some video content coming out on it, as well as on Substack. Again, this is potentially big news coming. I want to say more, but I can't. But know that to be staying tuned for it. We've got lots of folks who are going to be talking on this. So yeah, I guess
I do want to go back to what you said about the urine and blood test. And I do think some people will mention this in your comments or even say something about it. Vinyl chloride is in cigarettes, but at a very low dose, is it going to be in your body? So low that it's like 0.00001, I think. And you could tell. And for anyone to be way exceeded past that, I mean, you'd have to smoke almost a whole truckload of cigarettes.
Gotcha.
For it to be what's showing up in these tests.
Yep, and I think that's another point that one of my sources was explaining, as far as folks, you know, the CD, or not the CDC, but the clinic should have been testing people on a weekly basis, whether it be the state, the CDC. Maybe the CDC should have been the ones here doing it. But you kind of, that's why it's important to have the tested numbers, right?
Yeah.
And especially to track them over time, because then you can kind of, right now, unfortunately, they'll be like, oh, it's the cigarettes. They're gonna. So it's good that you made the point. They'll easily try to blame it on these little things. If our agencies were actually competent and had a plan for something like this happening at the time, they would have gone through and done weekly tests in a lot of cases.
Or even tested back again at our homes. We've only had one air test in our homes, and people are still getting sick. And I had even called the EPA about that. And they added a couple more chemicals from the ones that they had originally. I have the list. I mean, I could send it to you guys, but they added a couple more, and that's it. Why aren't they going back into the homes now and testing again with these couple more? Those
first residential air tests that were done were an absolute joke, from what I can tell. I did a lot of digging into that. This was for those watching. These were the tests that were done to essentially like tell people that your home is safe to go back to.
And they can also access it too on the EPA's website. It's under the East Palestine section. They can see how confusing and wild it is. It can take you almost an entire day to navigate to see what the tests mean.
Right, and a big issue that I found with this was the devices being used in a lot of cases were these handheld multi-ray devices. It's a PID, a photoionization detector. These essentially go in and they can do a broad test for VOCs, which is a very broad category of things. When you do these broad tests, according to a chemist and a toxicologist that I've spoken with, you're not going to get very accurate readings. These devices also, while they could detect something like a vinyl chloride, they can't detect a lot of the chemical byproducts of vinyl chloride. The notable ones that he pointed out to me were phosgene. You're never going to find phosgene with one of those devices, and phosgene is a chemical byproduct of vinyl chloride that is set on fire. Formaldehyde, you can only find formaldehyde with one of those devices when you have a special attachment on it. When you have that attachment on it, you cannot do the broad test for VOCs.
And none of the ones in town outside have the attachment that needs to go on the top to actually filter in at a lower level to detect any of it.
Yep. And a notable thing about both phosgene and formaldehyde is if you can smell either of those, you're already well above the limit for exposure, which is obviously a major concern, especially at that point when people were reporting smells. Residents were being told by CTEH, the contractor hired by the railroad, and by the EPA, that, oh, it's probably just butyl acrylate, which is the one chemical of concern that has a lower odor threshold. However, that doesn't mean that it's below the action level in a lot of cases
And
where
if
you
it
shouldn't be there.
wasn't that bad, why are they rotating employees every month?
Yeah.
They told me they rotate them every month. So that's really odd.
Yeah. No.
But we can live there. They just can't work there for more than a month.
I'll be very curious. We're still kind of going through a lot of the data, but I do have access to some independent home tests that have been done. They are very complicated to look at. So we'll be kind of going through those in the next couple of days, and I'll be very curious to compare a lot of those to a lot of the other tests. That
and you guys have my surface testing, I think, too. So you can see what chemicals were actually picked up on a surface test, and that's not being offered.
Which should have been done much of the time before. Let's see. We've got a question from Jordan, a celebrity question here. What do you think that she has seen from the EPA since the DeWine plastics? Okay, gotcha. I'm gonna rephrase the question. So when we're kind of looking at this and this kind of ties into what I was talking earlier of the potential incompetencies related to a lot of this. We had the big plastics fire in Indiana. I don't know if you saw some of that recycling center. For those of you watching. Caught on fire. It seemed it was like almost essentially an abandoned recycling plant filled with plastics. Set on fire, a fire that lasted days. Half a mile zone was evacuated. The EPA there also seemingly kind of dragging their feet a little bit.
Yep.
I mean, what are your thoughts on that and as it relates to this, and then just thinking to the future of like where else this can be happening?
I hope that the people there kind of watch what we've been going through, and if they haven't, look back from where we were at the beginning to where we are now to maybe get a jump start on what to do next, because it's almost the same thing. These chemicals are burning. It's the black smoke was identical.
Yeah.
So I mean, they need to contact their insurance if the EPA is not going to help. Try to get smoke damage. They need to really work together to get things going, get that line for your blood, urine if you can, and make them do it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, it's unfortunate. We reached out to the EPA quite a bit around, like, when that happened there. I knew all the right questions to ask right away, and they did not answer the ones that I really cared about. Unfortunately, those residents, again, were allowed into their homes before having any sort of... You're right, they shouldn't be. So it's another, again, just incompetence, or maybe not. Maybe they know that they're doing it wrong. It's tough because, like, I knew going into the whole East, you know, for me, covering East Palestine has been a big thing. I've learned a lot doing this. I thought that these agencies were better. I thought that they were better. I knew that there was issues, right? I've talked with Jordan about issues that he's seen with these agencies in Flint and elsewhere. I've seen other issues in places like Jackson, Mississippi, myself, doing some coverage there of their water crisis. But, like, when you see it just so blatant, you start to wonder.
And you guys are covering it, and you wouldn't have known, because all the media leaves, and like all of these places that you've mentioned are still the same.
Yeah.
They still have issues. They have really severe medical issues. And I don't think the medical monitoring, what they're doing for us, is okay. And I think anyone that has to deal with anything where you have to evacuate someone 1 mile, immediately medical.
Right.
They need to immediately give this information to these people. They should have it printed out. The EPA should be ready.
Right.
This is what we're going to test for today. It's still going. We're going to test today. As soon as we get it back, we're going to give you the pamphlet tomorrow in person to make sure you're alive and you are all right.
Right.
And we're going to make sure we know how many people are in that 1 mile. The EPA has no idea how many people reside in the 1 mile radius for us, which is sickening because they don't know if people are dead in their homes right now.
Right.
And we won't know unless we go door to door. We don't know how many people are there, how many people aren't. They really need to get their stuff together and be more transparent. Just like any job. You would get fired for not doing your job right. We can't fire them, so we're stuck with them.
Yeah, I mean, you said it.
We as in a
perfectly right there.
whole.
Yeah, no.
We as in a whole.
The fact
if
that
we
they
could,
don't.
I guarantee East Palestine would fire them.
No, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, the fact that they don't have a plan in place for, again, obviously every situation is a little bit different, right? But anytime there's some sort of evacuation, like, let's use the Indiana thing for an example. East Palestine already happened at that point. Even if they didn't have a plan before East Palestine, I don't know what their deal was then. But now you've got, rolling into Indiana. They should know that they should be doing residential air tests. They should know that that they needed to be doing urine tests
And
in the
it's not
residence.
like, oh, we didn't know, because this is everywhere. Like, this should not be a, oh,
No.
oops, we made a mistake.
No, and this isn't, this East Palestine's, this derailment is on a much bigger scale than has happened in a lot of other places, but it's not the first time that areas have been essentially poisoned by chemicals, whether it be from a factory, whether it be from smaller train derailments, whether it be from a truck explosion. It's happened before. What if these what do these agencies exist for if it's not for stuff like this?
And then we have a person that caused everything from being negligent. Everyone says the same thing. This could have been prevented. We've got him talking to us like a robot. And 6 months ago, whenever you watch him talking about his stocks and how happy, he had a grin like this the whole time. Just talking like that, right through his teeth. And now we have not seen a smile on his face. He knows what he's doing is wrong, but he's not going to show it. He hasn't even still contacted me back. Nothing.
Yeah. No, it's outrageous. I guess one last area I'd like to get your thoughts on. So, I mean, you've been in some meetings with government officials. We mentioned Sherrod Brown earlier. What is your, it doesn't specifically have to be with Senator Sherrod Brown, but what has your thoughts on the response been from your senators? Obviously, Senator Brown, Senator Vance. We know we've already kind of covered the governor, but at the federal level, maybe like a month and a half ago, they were kind of talking about doing some sort of legislation to try to, tighten up rail regulations and try to, do something that might prevent something in the future. But it's kind of gone quiet. I don't really hear much about it anymore. Do you think
2 months ago, Sherrod Brown did, it was a month ago, Sherrod Brown did talk about that and said he wanted to do something bipartisan. So even talking with him, I could tell he's genuine and sincere, but he does have to have other people backing him.
Right.
And him and J.D. Vance wanted to do a bipartisanship, really talk about it and help us. But he does need a lot more people to go in and help him to make anything be done. So you get that glimmer of hope and you're like, maybe something's going to happen. But then you wait.
Right.
And now we're in a crunch time that maybe in June we have to go back to our homes and wait in our homes. Right.
And it's unfortunate because while, yes, there needs to be some pressure on them to do this, but, there really shouldn't need to be. They represent you. Sherrod Brown works for you. J.D. Vance works for you.
What, they passed a law on the Christmas Eve. I mean, the White House passed a law on Christmas Eve, so these people can do anything.
And
that
was
a holdup.
BS, omnibus bill or whatever that was just filled with all sorts of nonsense and whatnot. But they can't. Right. This is
something detrimental to a lot of people's health, and we don't know if it's affecting people downriver.
Right.
Which they should probably, honestly, if you've been sick or been around water and you had the symptoms we're mentioning, you should probably get a test. You should probably get a baseline of yourself because there's a chance.
Yeah. It's. You don't want to get into politics on it because they're all but they're the ones who are going to try to prevent
politics.
this. No, that's okay.
And that's the biggest thing, and this is why I don't, because I want to keep in my heart and think other people are genuinely sincere and care about other people. And the more I'm in this, the more the wind is taken out of me, and I just can't even express. I get to the point, I drop my jaw and just stand there and think, wow,
Right.
this is unreal.
Yep. The thing that concerns me is the further in time we get away from from February 3rd, essentially, in my opinion, the less likely we're going to see some sort of new regulation surrounding the railroads. People have short memories. You can say better than anybody, or you can say better than I can what the media coverage has been in town since compare February to now.
Here and there we'll get someone different, but
Yep.
it's not anything like it was.
Yep.
I've
So,
even reached out to people with newer stuff, like, hey, you guys might be interested in this, and there was talk about a train recently that had a malfunction right exactly beside where they're pulling up the tracks.
yeah.
And still, like, that should have been covered. That should
Right.
be out there, because who's to say next week maybe some worker left something on that track to
Right.
cause something
Yeah.
like that.
Yep. No, it's outrageous. Well, I'm hoping that we do start to see some sort of legislation move there. As far as trying to prevent something in the future, that's not going to help you all now.
Yeah.
For helping you all now, I really think that there should be serious consideration in doing something similar to what was done in Libby, Montana, where folks were all put onto Medicare essentially for the rest of their lives after a company essentially poisoned the population there. Without getting into the specifics, it's happened before.
But
I think
30 years later, they said, oh, now it's clean. Now it's good. 30 years after they've been living in this,
Right.
even with that help.
Yeah, and it's outrageous that, I don't know, there needs to be more discussion about making sure that nobody is needing to worry about their health care with this going on, as far as, like, if you're getting symptoms, and I hope that this doesn't happen, but the scary stuff is what happens in 5 years, what happens in 10 years.
And a lot of people are losing their memory. Like, people can't remember things. It's like you walk into a room and it's getting worse with a lot of people I've talked to.
Yeah, so we'll ultimately see what starts to happen here. I'm going to start to wrap this up. Colin, I'm not sure if we have any super chats or anything, but we can be happy to read some of those if we get them. For those of you still watching, definitely stay tuned for a whole bunch more coming from this trip in East Palestine. There's also a whole lot more content coming from Jordan's reporting trip in Kalamazoo, as well as in Flint. So if you're not subscribed already, please press subscribe down below. You can click the bell for notifications, as Ashley noted earlier. And if you're able to support us actually coming, spending the time, talking with folks like Ashley. I did 2 long interviews with 2 different residents earlier today, one in East Palestine, one just over the border in Darlington, Pennsylvania. Darlington has been very affected by this as well. If the train derailed 600 feet further down the track, we'd be talking about Darlington, Pennsylvania, and not East Palestine. And I think that gets missed in a lot of the coverage surrounding this. So if you're able to support this type of reporting that we're doing on the ground here, again, also we've got a big story coming in regards to some major discrepancies that the EPA has yet to been able to answer any of the questions. I can't get into the details right now, but I can assure you that it's going to be a big story. Jordan and I have been working hard on it, speaking with all sorts of sources over the last 2 weeks trying to put this together. Keep an eye out for it literally in the next couple of days. If you're able to support that kind of stuff, statuscoup.com/join, literally as low as $5 a month.
And when live goes off, if you guys want to talk to me in the comments, I try to keep up and talk to everyone I can.
Alrighty. So super chats. We've got $5 from Teresa. Thank you, Teresa. Colin, do I need the starred one? I've got top chat. Sorry.
Oh, it's right here.
Oh, duh, right there. Okay. Thank you, Colin. Sorry, guys. Jordan. I just
Where is it?
There we go. Jordan, all right. Jordan commented, $10. This is Lewis and Status Coup's 3rd reporting trip to East Palestine in 3 months. This is expensive reporting. Please chip in if you can. Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate the $10. Humorous, $5. Folks, I can't support this channel myself. I've given these people thousands. I just can't do it myself. Please help if you
Thank
can.
you.
Thank you, Humorous. We appreciate the support as always. Chris Garrett, $5. Agreed, Humorous. If you can find this reporting valuable, please contribute and become a member. Chris, thank you so much for the super chat. I know you are also often giving super chats and are also a member, just like Humorous. We appreciate it. Teresa, $5. Keep it up. 10 euros from RMPP. Thank you, RMPP. We appreciate it. and another $10 from Robin Bennett. Thank you guys all so much for all the super chats. We really appreciate it. It helps a lot. And again, the main way, the most consistent way to help us out, literally $5 a month, statuscoup.com/join. That goes a long way to being able to know that we have consistent money coming in so that we can continue sending me places like here in East Palestine. Jordan has been reporting in Flint for 7 years at this point, right? 7, 6?
It's
7 years. 7. That's a lot.
I think they're at 9.
Yeah, they're on.
Flint's at 9.
9
Yeah, 9.
years,
Yeah,
but-
I mean, a long time. Reporting in Kalamazoo. We had Tina in Atlanta earlier this year. Election coverage. We've got all sorts of stuff like that. If you are able to help support it, please do. Thank you all so much for watching.